There we go. For 120 years, Noah was building a teva, an ark. And when people would approach him and they would ask him, what are you doing? He would respond, God is bringing a flood upon the world. And through this conversation, he would inspire these people to change their ways and do tshuva and hopefully return to Almighty God. Unfortunately, he could not save the world. And so God brought a flood upon the world, 40 days and 40 nights, wiped out the entire civilization, all humankind, all animals, all plants, even 3 tvachim, 3 handbreadths of earth was washed away with this flood. After the flood, God tells Noah, "Tsei min hateva, leave the ark." Noah was in the ark for 1 entire year, 365 days. He was stuck in this ark. And finally, he tells him, "Tsei min hateva, leave the ark." And then he tells Noah the following: I make a covenant with you, a treaty, that I will never ever bring a mabul, a flood on this world. Noah was very concerned. Why should I start to populate the world, have children and grandchildren, and then God one day will decide to wipe out the world again? So God tells Noah, I will never bring a mabul on the world again, and I will make a covenant with you. Here is the rainbow. This rainbow that I'll put in the sky is the covenant, is the bris, the covenant that I will never bring a mabul onto this world. Says the pasuk, says the verse, Vayomer Elikim. God tells Noah, verse number 12. God tells Noah, Zois ois bris. This is the sign of the covenant. Asher ani noisein beini uvenechem, that I am placing between me, myself, God, and you. Uvein kol nefesh chaya, and between all the living animals. Asher idchem, that is with you in this ark, the doidos olam, for the generations of the world. If you look at the word doidos in Hebrew, you see it here in verse number 12. It's spelled Lamid Dalid Reish Tuf. You see that? The Dorot.
It's missing the vavs.
It's missing 2 vavs. Very good. It's missing 2 vavs. It says the Medrash like this. Listen to the following Medrash. It says in Medrash Rabbah, L'doirois ksiv. It's written the word generations. However, it's missing 2 letter vavs. Prat l'shnei doiros, to tell us that only in 2 generations, specifically, shebehem lo nida ois hakeshes ba'olam. The doide shel Hezekiah or the doide shel anshe knesset hagdolah. Says the Medrash that there are 2 generations that a rainbow did not appear. Because these 2 generations, the people were so great, they had a generation in which there was Hezekiah HaMelech, Hezekiah the king, and the men of the great assembly, and because of their merits, they protected the entire world. And because they protected the entire world, there was no reason to have a rainbow. In other words, when a rainbow appears, it reminds us that God is angry at us and he should bring a flood. But you should know that there were 2 generations that had no rainbow. The generation of Hezekiah and the generation of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, because they were so great. Hezekiah Melech was so great, and Anshe Knesset Hagdolah was so great that they protected the whole world. There was no reason for a rainbow. Who is Hezekiah Melech? Hezekiah Melech was a king who lived during the First Holy Temple. He reigned from 562 to 533 before the Common Era. The Gemara says about him, he was so great that God wanted to make him the Mashiach. What did he do? The Gemara says that throughout his generation, he made every single Jewish boy and girl, every single adult, every single teenager was well versed in the entire Torah. Batku, B'don B'ad Beersheba. Says the Gemara, they checked from Dan till Beersheba, from one side of Israel to the other. They did not find any person that was an ignoramus. They did not find even a young boy and a young girl that was not totally proficient in the laws of Tumah, Vitara, purity and impurity, the most challenging, most difficult laws in the Torah. This is what Hezekiah HaMelech did. He created an educational system throughout the entire Israel, and therefore he was able to bring the knowledge of Torah to every single Jew. And of course, the more you know, the more you observe. So his generation was great, but in his merit, says the Medrash, a rainbow did not appear throughout his generation. Says the Medrash another time. What was the other time? Anshe Knesset Agdol. The men of the great assembly, 120 of the greatest men of Israel, including Hananiah, Mishav Azariah, Malachi, Ezra, Mordechai, etc., etc. The era of the Anshe Knesset Agdol, the men of the great assembly, was primarily 350 BCE until 273 BCE, to the death of Shimon HaTzadik. Throughout that generation, again, these men of the great assembly, these 120 towering giants, brought protection to the world. There's no reason for a rainbow to appear. This is the first two opinions of the Medrash. Comes along, Rabbi Raskin comes along and says, no, Moitzi doiroin shel anfei kezak doilo maybe doiroi shel Rabbi Shimon Yochai. He says we've got to swap. We have two generations. We have two letter vavs that are missing. So I want to exchange, he says, the generation of the men of the great assembly for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great author of the Zohar, the principal disciple of Rabbi Akiva, the one that was in a cave for 13 years. In his generation, there was no rainbow because of his greatness. It says that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, I can bring atonement to the entire world. I alone can bring atonement to the entire world. It's brought down in the Zohar that when in his generation, children were walking around reciting the secrets of the Kabbalah. So again, we have two generations. The generation of Hezekiah HaMelech and the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. These two generations did not require a rainbow, did not have a rainbow because of these two tzaddikim who were so great. This is the Medrash. Now we have Rashi. What does Rashi say? Rashi says the following. Rashi says like this. I gave each one of you a paper. Says Rashi, the Doiris Olam Nichtav Choser. It is written defective. It is missing the letter vavs. Why? Sheyesh Doiris Shaloi Hutzuchu La'ois. To generations that did not require this rainbow. Lefisha Tzadikim Geburim Hayub. Because the generation itself, says Rashi, Rashi twists it around. He doesn't say that there were two individuals who were great. He says the generation was great. The generations were great. Like the generation of Hezekiah HaMelech Yehuda, and like the generation of Shimon ben Yochai. Their generation was great. The people of the generation were great. Now, obviously, it had to do with the instruction and the mentorship of Hezekiah and his generation, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in his generation, and they affected the entire generation. But it wasn't these two people who brought the protection. It was the generation itself. The people themselves were deserving that the generation should not have a rainbow. Now, what is the basis for this argument? Why does Rashi say we're talking about the generation? And why does the Medrash say we're talking about two people, individuals? So the answer is like this. The Medrash looks at the missing vavs. There are two vavs missing. The doiros is missing two vavs. Two vavs is two generations. If it's two generations, then we're talking about two individuals. Only two people who were so great that they protected the entire generation. because generations themselves, there were other generations that did not deserve to have a mabul, that did not deserve to have a flood. But as people, as a tzaddik, the caliber and the quality of this greatness, there were only two, says the Medrash. That was Hezekiah Melech, the king Hezekiah of Judah, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In their merit, the entire world was protected, and there was no rainbow. Rashi, on the other hand, we spoke many times, teaches a child the Torah. He is a 5-year-old Melamed. He's teaching children who are beginning to study the Torah. The path of Rashi is not to get into the details of missing letters in the verse or missing letters in a word. So Rashi says, yes, L'doides nichtav chaser, it is written defective, but he doesn't get into how many letters are missing, etc., etc. Furthermore, there's a bigger problem here, and that is, why do we have the word L'doides olam for the generations of the world? A very unusual terminology. It should have said that God made a covenant with the world, and he made a rainbow forever and ever. What this terminology, the dorot olam, for the generations of the world, is not found in other places. And therefore, it bothers Rashi here. Why are we saying the dorot, the generations? And therefore, Rashi says this is the answer, that we're talking about generations, the people of the generation, not a person in the generation, but the entire generation. That there were 2 generations and more, he says. He doesn't say only. He says, sheyesh doides, there were generations. For example, the generation of Hezekiah and the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But not only these 2. There were others also that were deserving of protection because of the fact that they were a great generation. They were tzaddikim and gemurim. Now, what is really the fundamental difference here between these 2 approaches? And the answer is like this. I have seen in my lifetime more than one rainbow. And I'm sure that many of you have seen beautiful rainbows as you drive down the highway after a thunderstorm. You see these amazing rainbows. Now, what does it mean? Does it mean every time there's a rainbow? God is telling us, guys, right now, this moment, the world deserves to be destroyed? Or not? That's the question. That's the question. How do we understand this? And there are 2 approaches to this. There's the approach of the Medrash and the approach of Rashi. According to Rashi, there's one approach, and the Medrash another approach. The Medrash will learn it on a homiletic level. God says, I'm making a rainbow for a covenant. And every time you see the rainbow, you'll remind yourself of that covenant. It doesn't mean at this moment I want to destroy the world. Within the realm of nature, there is the concept of rainbows. But when you see the rainbow, think beyond that and remind yourself that God once brought a flood to the world, and he promised he's never going to bring another flood to the world. It doesn't mean this moment. But if a moment comes that the world is so corrupted and so debased that it deserves to be destroyed, I won't do that. Why? Because I made with you a covenant. But not this moment. By looking at the actual rainbow, do I deserve, or do you deserve, the world to be destroyed? That's one approach. Another approach is Rashi. If you look into Rashi here, 9:14. Look over here at Rashi. Rashi says, when I bring a cloud, kishetale b'machshava lefanai, lahavi choshech va'avdon la'olam. In other words, Rashi says, when you see the rainbow, you should know that at that moment, I want to bring destruction upon the world. In other words, when I have it in mind to bring darkness and destruction upon the world, I will right away present a rainbow. And that rainbow will remind me, oh, God, you got to remind yourself. Remember that the covenant you had with Noah, you can't bring a flood to the world. Now, here the Rebbe gives a very interesting, unique insight. And he says that when we say that we're not bringing a flood to the world, it doesn't only mean that I'm not going to bring a flood to the entire world. But there could be also times that a certain area, a certain location deserves to die because of a flood. And Rashi says even that won't happen. Because why? Because of a rainbow. Because of the rainbow. I promise I'm not going to destroy the world with a flood. Now, what's the difference between a flood and a punishment? What's the difference?
Oh, he must have left by mistake.
He left by mistake.
What a shame.
But also,
Oh no, here he is.
oh, here he is.
Okay.
When we move ahead into next week's Parsha, and the Parsha after that, when we talk about Avraham Avinu, you don't have to look inside, and that is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. When it comes to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is fire, the destruction through fire, over there, why does God tell Abraham, I want to destroy the world, I want to destroy Sodom? Abraham says, if there are 10 righteous people, don't do it. When it comes to the flood, we don't find that there's a argument or discussion, maybe there are 10 righteous people. When it comes to Sodom, we do find. Why? Because when it comes to a punishment can be averted if there's a certain level of righteousness. Because it's a punishment. But when it comes to a flood is not punishment. It's more than that. It's regret. I regret that I created the world. And because I regret that I created the world, I'm wiping it away. I'm erasing it. It's like it never existed. So when it comes to this regret, this flood, God needs to bring a rainbow each time to remind himself that I cannot do it. Even though I regret what I did, I have to hold myself back. I have to control my wrath and not bring this punishment to the world. Comes along Rashi and says, even so, there were two generations. That the people of the generation were great. And because of that, we did not need a rainbow to protect us from any type of destruction. But God, the entire world was good, that even specific secluded areas did not deserve to have any level of mabul, any level of destruction. Let me take it one step further. There's a famous teaching from the Alter Rebbe who says that the idea of the flood was actually to bring tahara, purity to the world. Just like a mikvah is made up of 40 saw of rain, and that brings purity to the world. The flood was 40 days and 40 nights, and the purpose of the flood, 40 days and 40 nights, is to bring tahara to the world, to bring purity to the world. In other words, and after the flood, the world was now on a much higher level than it was before. And because of the flood, because of this purity, the world could no longer, so to speak, become so debased like it was before. And therefore, Noah says, I see a new world. It's a new world. Why? Because the level of purity that exists now never existed before. This concept is going to happen again right before the coming of Mashiach. There's going to be a flood in the world, a flood of knowledge, a flood of Torah that's going to bring an entire level of purity to the entire world. As it says in Isaiah, that I will create a new heaven and a new earth. Now, this concept gives us some insight on why Rashi only gives us two names, two generations. If, according to Rashi, there are numerous generations that did not deserve a flood, why only choose the generation of Hezekiah and the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? But the answer is that Rashi is hinting to us the secret and the objective of this ultimate flood, this flood of knowledge with the coming of Mashiach. And that is, Mashiach will have two qualities. He's going to be a king and he's going to be a teacher. Mashiach is going to be a melech, he's going to be a rab. And primarily at the beginning, he's going to be more a king, and later he's going to be more of a teacher. At the beginning, he's going to be a king, he's going to fight the wars of God, to bring ethics and values and stability to the world. But after the world is now in a state of peace and harmony, then he's going to be primarily a teacher. So much so, he's going to teach even Moses and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob the Torah. And so therefore, Rashi hints to us, these two people who we are connected with, who are associated with the coming of Mashiach. As we stated earlier, the Gemara says that Hezekiah Melech, King Hezekiah, that he was so great that God wanted to make him Mashiach. But as the Gemara says, there was some reason why it didn't happen. But the potential of being Mashiach was in the generation and in the personality of Hezekiah. And then again, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who introduced the Zohar, he says that with this book, with this holy book, the Jewish people are going to encounter and receive the harbinger, the coming of Mashiach, speedily in our days. So these two qualities, these two bookmarks, represent this generation of the transformation of the world and within our daily life. By doing these two things, we bring about our redemption, our geula. That no longer shall we be consumed by the turbulent waters of the world around us. To protect us from this crazy, chaotic world is by accessing and actualizing these two figures, these two personalities, and that is the personality of Hezekiah and the personality of Rashbi. Hezekiah was a king. A king means discipline, means you are in control. As the Rebbe said many times, each person is a king over their own body. You are a king over yourself. No one in the world can tell you what to do. You are your own master. And you have the power to make your own decisions. So number one is you have to be Hezekiah, you have to be strong in your determination, strong in your adherence, strong in your commitment, and do not allow anything or any person in the world to dissuade you. Number two is the Rashbi. Represents Teirasai and Rasai, his whole life is Torah, and primarily famous for introducing the secrets of the Torah. As you know today, to learn the revealed Torah is not enough. You need to learn the soul of the Torah. And by the fact that we do these two things every day, which is kingship, which is mitzvos, to do acts of goodness and kindness. And number two, to study Torah every day. Through this, we bring about the geula, the redemption in our life. And this will bring about the ultimate rainbow, as it says in the Zohar, when Mashiach will come. There'll be a big rainbow from one side of the world to the other, with tremendous colors, tremendous light, tremendous illumination, representing how the Shekhinah has arrived with the coming of Mashiach from Heir Aviminu. Amen.